I really do want it to be like a value add. And that's like, that can be value add through like, man, I just wrote something that somebody got a lot of value from, right? Then I also want it to be value add in the sense that like, I don't want to be taking more from my audience than what they are getting from me. So like, if you think about something like a partnership or like some sort of like affiliate type thing, it's like, hey, if there's a way for like my audience to like get value through like a discount from someone, and then that's what also earns me something, like that's compelling to me because it's like I'm not taking something that they're not getting.
And welcome back to Long Run Labs. We have Seth LaReau joining today. Seth is the writer of my number one must open newsletter, Trailwaves. Seth, thanks so much for taking some time to chat.
Yeah, happy to be here, and that's way too kind of a intro, but I'll take it.
It's not too kind because it's true. I was talking about it with Aaron Litzy on Second Nature, and we both agreed that anytime your newsletter hits the inbox, it's a pause what you're doing and read it. So with great power comes great responsibility.
It's like, it's tough because sometimes I'm like literally like finishing it up after work. I'm like, oh, I'll just sneak this in like before everyone goes to bed. But now that I know people are, disrupting people's sleep habits, I don't know if that's more pressure or if that's, more validation. But
I feel like you sent one the other day that was like 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. I remember reading it from bed and I was like, okay, I have to read it now.
yeah, not my intention, but I do appreciate it for sure.
So let's take a few steps back. Question I kick these podcasts off with is, who is Seth?
Oh man, Seth is just a average guy. Grew up in the Midwest, blue collar family, moved to California, and now I just have 2 kids. Like to run trails, like to write about trail running. Simple man.
We got to meet in person at Big Alta a couple weeks ago. Solomon hosted us out there, and we had a wonderful weekend. I refer back to the podcast with Aaron Cooper on the marketing side for a fascinating dive into women in sport and business and how to think about brand marketing. And stoked to dive into this conversation with you on content, on imposter syndrome, on building an audience and a brand, and what does it look like, or how do we do this kind of stuff full time. You have a finance background, so you have a above average look at the economics of everything. Let's start by talking about you as Seth the runner. When did running find you?
I started running, gosh, it was probably like 2014. So like I grew up playing like football and basketball. Never like hated running, but I was probably like the mid 20 teens. I was working in public accounting and then was transitioning into like startups, but just spending a lot of time, just long hours, long commutes, just sitting in a chair. And I was just like, I need to do something. And I tried like gyms, but I just couldn't like get the consistency. And so then I eventually started running. But then I found like when I started running, the thing that would kind of keep me running was like, oh, I need to sign up for some big goal, which at the time was like a half marathon. So then I would basically like do that every quarter, run a half marathon, train for it. And then eventually got injured, as people do when they start running and do it too much. And then found the trails as, coming out of that injury. And then ever since then, just kind of been hooked on the trails. So.
And were you in the Bay Area at the time?
Yeah, I lived in San Francisco. So we lived in San Francisco for about 12 years, and now we've been in the East Bay for like 4. So yeah, basically I've lived in California since graduating from college, and then kind of ran a lot in San Francisco and started running on the trails in Marin. And that was sort of my introduction to trail running, which I now realize is like a very privileged introduction to trail running.
It's a really tough intro to trail running. I lived in Boston, and my introduction to trail running were those same trails. And if you asked me in 2015 where I trail ran, I'd say I get on a plane and fly to San Francisco and go to Mill Valley. Truly some of the best trails on earth, and that California carpet is wonderful. So you were working for Strava at the time. Is that what brought you to San Francisco?
No, so I started my career at a public accounting firm, which I interned with when I was in college, and then just came out here did that for a few years, realized that was not like my long-term plan. Then I went and started working in-house at a startup, which was kind of like learning like the full accounting and finance stack. And then eventually got brought to Strava by my previous boss at that startup. So I joined Strava in like 2016.
Those were still kind of the early days, right? I think I joined Strava in 2014 and it wasn't a very popular platform at the time. The next few years it kind of took off, right?
Yeah, I want to say it was maybe like a little over 100 employees when I joined, and then I worked there for 3.5 years until basically till like right before COVID, and then I want to say it was like maybe 250 people by then. So it definitely like grew a bit and then popped off even more after I left. But yeah, I mean, I would say like I was kind of started running before Strava, and then working at Strava and just working with like the people there and just the knowledge and just the environment. That's kind of where I got indoctrinated into the running and trail running world.
So fast forward a few years, you've really found trail running. You've found your niche in trail running on the professional side, and you decide that you want to start writing about it. What does that process look like? Where did that decision come from?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was one of those things. My like generally I'll have these, I don't know, just like itches or just like thoughts. It's like sort of like this inner conviction that like, hey, I want to do this thing, but I almost need to like convince myself how like why it makes sense. It's like even though I'm gonna eventually do this, it's almost like giving myself the permission to do it. So I just had this idea of like I want to create something. I've always had like sort of a creative side, and I've never felt, I would say, at home as like a finance and accounting guy. Like I don't feel like not that I'm trying to like generalize finance and accounting people, but I've never really felt like I fit that personality or fit that personality type or that mold or whatever. And I've always had this just creative outlet that I've tried to exercise, and so that was definitely part of it. But then the other part of it was just like, okay, if I want to do that, what am I like good at, or what do I at least have experience in like professionally? So that's like the finance and accounting side. And then it's like, what is an activity or hobby or something that I spend my time doing or consuming? And obviously trail running, I spend a lot of time trail running. I watch like the Western States live stream every year. So I'm like, well, it's definitely trail running. And then it's really just like, okay, what is that intersection, right? It's like, and how does that look? And that's sort of how I kind of started formulating the idea. And then again, like lots of imposter syndrome and kind of trying to convince myself why it would or could work.
But you did it, and you chose to do it, and so you overcame the imposter syndrome. We shared a drive to Stinson Beach at Big Alta on the day of the 100K, and it's too bad that conversation wasn't recorded because it was like we were diving into imposter syndrome and the fact that both of us feel it. And my commentary was like the number of Olympians that I've talked to that also feel imposter syndrome. It's the kind of thing that like maybe it's the chip on your shoulder that pushes you to keep striving, that people who are suffering from imposter syndrome are like on their way to something great, and or they've already accomplished something great. Like again, I've literally spoken to people who are at the top of the world at their craft and feel like they don't belong. What was your experience with that, or what is your experience with that, and how do you overcome it?
Yeah, I would say I feel it all the time. I mean, and I think a lot of it, I think at least for me, the way I look at it is like, it's one is like a level of self-awareness. It's like being aware of like my flaws, like being aware of like what I'm good at versus maybe not good at. And then, but then I think the other part of it is like, I think that when people find imposter syndrome, it's because they are like putting themselves in a situation that is like new or like is the
Vulnerable.
place where they're going to grow. Yeah. And so I think, if you're just like playing it safe and you're never like challenging yourself, like, yeah, maybe you don't feel imposter syndrome. Whereas I like to think, or at least what I tell myself is I'm feeling this because I'm putting myself out there in a way that can or will lead to growth or like good outcomes. And the imposter syndrome is sort of like the entry fee to that, I
Yep.
guess.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, it's tough because it's like, there's going to, you put things on the internet, there's going to be people who don't agree, and there's going to be smarter people than me that have a different take. And so I think it's just like, okay, if I'm just approaching it authentically and from my own perspective and not trying to be someone else or cater to someone else, then at least it's like coming from a place of truth. And then we can obviously debate like facts or whatever, but I just try to center myself around that like authenticity, I guess.
Do you ever hesitate before hitting send or schedule?
Yeah, I actually think those are the articles that end up, I think, performing, quote unquote, or resonating the most. And maybe there's a correlation. Like, even the one that I recently wrote about our Solomon experience, like I definitely was like, okay, this is ready to go, but I'm a little nervous to hit send because I know that there's going to be people who are going to read it who are there, or like people who work at Solomon, or other people who are like, is this guy a sellout because he's going to this Solomon event? Like there's just all sorts of. So yeah, I would say I definitely hesitate. Although I like to think that means that it's like something I've put a
Something
lot
worthwhile.
into. Yeah.
One of the comments that someone said to me once was like, it's clear that the content you create is for you and because you want it to exist. I feel like the same is true. Like so much of what you put out seems to just be like Seth has a curiosity that he wants to explore. Like the top shoe brands from a performance standpoint on podiums, or like what's the economics of investing in the outdoor space. Like I would want to write or read those articles as well. Is that kind of how you're approaching the content?
Yeah. Yeah, I just try to look at it as like what's something that I wish existed, or wish like something that like a question that I have, and then let me explore that and share it and just provide my perspective. I mean, I try not to come across as like this is the answer. I try to
Right.
come across as like, hey, I had this question. Here's what I did to look into it. Here's what I found. Here's what I think. And then what do you all think? And so it's more of like inviting others to kind of have the conversation. And then yeah, I think the other part of it is just, yeah, like you said, just creating something that I wish existed in the space. Having a site like this that had this type of content, it's like, well, why don't I just do it? If it's something that I would want, like I'll just let me do it. And again, it's like people are gonna vibe with it, and that's amazing. And other people won't, and that's fine too. Like I'm not trying to like convince people that there's only one way. It's more just like adding another color to the palette.
Totally. And as an explanation of what is Trailwaves, as you've described on your site, Trailwaves is where I use my background in finance to explore the business, economics, and culture of trail and ultra running. It's as curious and insightful as a board meeting, but with the chill vibes of a long run with friends. Yeah, it definitely nails that. I'm recommending that anyone who enjoys this podcast subscribes to trailwaves.substack.com. Perhaps ironically, about a quarter of my subscribers come from you.
Oh wow.
I
Nice.
just looked, and 94 of my 410
Oh.
subscribers are referrals from Trailwaves. So the audience overlap is strong. So that's fun. Talk to me about some of the pieces lately that you've been enjoying, and let's kind of. I want to talk about one of them in particular, but I'm curious where you go in terms of the stuff you've been working on lately that you've really enjoyed.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I think the big one that I've done recently is just like the investment thesis one. I think
That was
that,
the one I hoped to talk about.
oh,
So
okay. Yeah, I
perfect.
mean, that one I just figured like, I try to find articles that it's like, do I enjoy putting this together? And like, that's sort of like one of the things I ask myself before I do it. And then I'll ask myself after I do it. It's like, do I enjoy this? And then do I think it's providing additive value to whoever's reading it? And like sometimes it's like, oh, I didn't really enjoy that as much as I thought I would, or maybe this one didn't really like, not a lot of engagement, so maybe it didn't really provide a lot of value. So like that's one that I think kind of hit both boxes, where I really enjoyed putting it together because it really sort of flexed some parts of my brain that I don't haven't used all the time. But then kind of being able to package it up, I was like, okay, it's definitely not perfect, but it packaged up in a way that I felt satisfied to put into the world.
Yeah, it was a good one. It's a space that I've been playing in a lot lately. Mel Strong was just on Second Nature talking about her experience as an investor in the space. She's with Next Ventures, partnered with Lance Armstrong and a third partner named Jordan out of New York. Next Ventures has invested in a variety of businesses in the health and tech and outdoor space, including Eternal, which I'm working with, and Aura, which they invested like quite early on, and that will be a massive return for that fund. The article talked through the opportunity and kind of like how to think about if you were to deploy dollars in the space, why would you do it, and what does the opportunity look like? Do you want to kind of give the 30,000 foot overview of where we're at from your seat?
Yeah, so I think the way that I kind of look at it is there's kind of like what's the opportunity in terms of like why are things coming together right now, and then there's like what's the opportunity in terms of like the numbers, right? So where things are coming together right now, the way that I kind of think about it is like imagine like trail running is this like I don't know village of people, and the village is getting bigger, and then the village is also able like there's more um like people from other villages are like learning more about the village. So it's like the village is getting bigger, but also like there's more um like sort of engagement, and just notoriety or whatever you want to say. And then I think there's also like macro trends like health and longevity just generally, right? Like there's a lot of like that's very top of mind for a lot of people, whether it's like diet or it's things like the Huberman Lab, like so I think trail running obviously fits underneath that big umbrella. So there's a lot of those conflating factors that I think are coming together. I can't remember the exact stat that I think it was Stephen Holmberg shared at the was it TrailCon last year about
Growing
trail running
8%
growing like
annually.
80% faster than road running or something like that. So it's like there's clearly like statistics that show that like trail running is also like growing relative to to other to even just like normal running, which is already quite large.
Yeah, the stat was trail running is growing 8% annually compared to just 0.5% for the broader running
Gotcha.
market, with
That's
much of that growth driven by casual participants.
That's right. Um, yeah, and then it's like, okay, cool. Like there's these like factors that are kind of coming together, and that might make it so that hey, this is happening, right? And then I think the other thing I wrote about is there's like it's more of like a maturing media ecosystem. So you have like free trail, you have single track, you have your podcast like yours, where it's like there's more coverage on endurance, outdoor wellness, etc. So it's becoming more, I guess, just like mainstreamed. Um, so then it's like, okay, cool. Like, what's the actual opportunity? Like, how do we think about it? So that's where I brought in just sort of like the market sizing analysis, which these are always kind of like you sort of like triangulate different data to come up with a good example. But some of the stats that I found or just numbers I found is I think the global sporting good market is like 112 billion. So it's like, okay, if that's like the sporting good market, how do you translate that to like the outdoor market, right? So I think I estimated that at like 100 billion. But it's like, okay, clearly you're not going to capture that whole thing. So then like what portion of that is like just trail running globally? And so there's that state of trail running report from a couple of years ago that estimated like 20 billion in the US was the size of the trail running market. So if you expand that to the world, you can get to like a 50 billion, and that data needs to be updated. So there's like even like going through like kind of how I think about it, I could say like, oh, here's like a follow-up thing that we should do if we really wanted to refine this analysis. So that's kind of how I think about it. And then you can kind of keep breaking it down and fragmenting it from there of like, okay, what is like the total gear and apparel market? What's the nutrition market? Like where are these sort of like sub opportunities? Um, and then from there, it's like, okay, which of those areas would be like the easiest for like a new company to either a new company to like start in, or if you're like an investor looking to deploy dollars and there's like growth opportunity, you can look at it from that way too.
So I've had a lot of those conversations lately. I spoke to a guy who manages a fund that has a couple $1 billion of assets under management, and his minimum investment, he has to be deploying $10 million or more, otherwise it doesn't make sense. And I was like, there's very little action that someone of that size can get in running, period. So my question to you is, where's the room for investment? Is it angels versus VC? I don't think private equity has, as much space to play unless they're just buying races. But how do you think about the deploying of dollars?
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, I think there are a couple analogies. Like I think Satisfy raised like $11 million or something like that. Norda just raised, I think, a pretty good chunk of. So it's like these are obviously like geared apparel brands where there's like a clear like, hey, we're going to use this money to either streamline our processes or just expand capacity to make X more like high margin pieces of gear and apparel that we can sell. And, so there's like a very clear return there because you're like, hey, you're giving me $10 million. I'm going to make this many more shoes and it's going to return, 10 times whatever. So that's like one area. But then I guess the other area is like, yeah, I mean, it's tough because I was talking to someone recently where like just take shoes, for example, or, maybe that's just a good market to prove this point. But it's like, you have these like incumbents, which like the incumbents are like Nike, or they're like Hoka, which is part of Deckers, or Solomon, which is part of Amerisport. Like you have these like conglomerates that are even like the trail running piece of it is only like one piece of that pie, but they're like publicly traded large brands. Or you have like the Nordas, the Normals, Speedlands, like Mount Dakota. Like you have kind of the more like upstarts. So you're kind of either going like really big or like startup, right? And so that's like I think you kind of see that across a lot of the categories, like same with like nutrition, right? Like you'll have startup nutrition companies that are doing something different than somebody else is doing, but then there's like Goo and there's Tailwind and there's all these. So I think that is a good question. That is a challenge of like, even if you had $100 million, like where do I put this, right?
Yeah, and the expectation of a return
Yeah.
for someone who's deploying $10 million versus someone who's deploying $100,000, like you have the ability to do different things with that capital. I think that there's a lot more room for angels doing 5 and 6 figure investments versus VCs and private equity doing 9 and 10 figure investments.
Yeah, and I think the time horizon is also different too, right? Like if you put in 5K as like an angel investment, 10K, whatever, you're kind of basically saying like, and just the type of investment it is, you're kind of just saying like, hey, I believe in this company, but at the same time, this is like a bet, right? Whereas like if you're
Right.
putting in $100 million or $10 million or something, you're like, I want a return in
Yeah. I need
a X amount of
50x.
years.
Yeah.
It can't be like, oh, I hope this works out or not. It's more like this
Right.
has to work out. So there's definitely like a higher level of conviction. Yeah.
Yeah, and the difference is also like people who are doing the angel investments are often they just want a seat at the table and they want to participate in the growth of the company. I've started to do this, or I've been doing this with a handful of companies, and like one of them, the target is 2030, and to go from a 15 to $100 million company in 5 years. Maybe that'll happen, maybe not, but I get to participate in the journey along the way, which is really fun.
Yeah. Do those companies have, like, when you work with those companies, do they have a very clear, like, here's our goal, and then like, here's our exit strategy? Like, we want to get to 100 million, and then we want to do either get acquired or whatever.
It depends. I mean, it's generally yes. Like there isn't like it's not charity, so I'm not like giving money to these companies to say go do your thing, and I never want to hear from you again. Generally, it's or anyone that's doing angel investment, they're close to the problem that is being solved, and they feel like they can either add value or they like the person, or they believe in the person who's running the show. And so for some of these, it's more conviction in the person leading the charge. Like I've talked at length about my friend Phil at Laurel. Laurel has basically a more efficient, more cost effective way to do race timing that can be deployed out of backpacks instead of trucks. And as a result, it's like 95% cheaper, and there are more redundancies so that you get better and more frequent checkpoints. But like Phil is a dog. Like I would bet on Phil. He'll just like figure it out kind of a thing. But he also knows what the end zone looks like and what he's building towards. And so some of it is just like conviction in who the person is or the problem that's being solved. Like another investment I made was in a company called Nestwell, and their whole thesis is we've over glamorized the like optimization culture, and everyone is focused on, you know, biomarkers and blood tests and you know, increasingly like peptides and these advanced longevity modalities. But he's like, what about our living environment, air, water, soil, like Parkinson's, the association with living close to a golf course. It's like 125% more likely to develop Parkinson's if you live with between 1 and 3 miles of a golf course. One of the things you can do to help with that, and this is like a scientifically validated statement, is use air filters and water purifiers. And so his point was like, this is something that will be mainstream soon, or people who have kids, you know, care about what's in the air and the water, etc. You know, if they don't personally. And so for me, like that one was like a bet on where the puck is going and where consumer behavior is headed. Same thing with Avelo, with, you know, the world's smartest shoe. All of our technology is smart except for our shoes. Somebody's going to address that at some point. And so that's another one that I've been participating in more on the advisory side since 2023, just because like I feel like that's where things are headed.
Nice. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it's kind of looking at like where are we now versus where will we be in 5 years, and
Right.
who can get us to doing that. Yeah, for sure.
So let's talk more about the building an audience or building a brand. You have a full-time job and you've started this Substack and you've started this media thing that you're creating. Similarly, I started my podcast while I had a full-time job, and you know, I was building the plane without needing it to be flown, so to speak, so that when I jumped out of the plane, I knew what my parachute looked like. And I perhaps knew the details of that parachute a little too intimately because I waited so long to deploy that parachute. But eventually it happened. Talk to me about how you're thinking about this.
I think I referenced it in one of my articles, but I remember there was an article or a free trail podcast. I think it was Rod Farver did with Debo, and he was talking about like being on the right path. And it just like really resonated with me, like the idea of like being on different paths and like finding your sort of true path, in the sense that I think you can kind of recognize when you are on it, whether it's momentarily or like you're just doing an activity or whatever, versus, you know, if you're just sort of in the rat race and maybe you're not feeling like this is the path. I think everyone probably resonates differently, but I think, you know, when you're on it, you know, when you're not. And so I just started thinking a lot about that, and just, I don't know, I think a lot about just like, what do I want? You know, especially I have two kids, they're like 6 and 3. And I think a lot about just like, what do I want the next like 10 to 15 years to be, in terms of just my own happiness, but also just my ability to just be around them and like spend as much time doing the things I want to do while I can do it. And so then I start thinking like, well, what would that be? And I think I've realized, like, you know, I'm lucky to have a good job that, you know, I feel, you know, content with, but it's also not necessarily like, it doesn't feed me in the same way as like being in, like going to the big Alta does, for example, where like being there, being at the race, interacting with people, like that felt like that's the type of thing that I want to be doing. And so I don't know. I mean, it kind of goes back to like the taking the first step and like the imposter syndrome. Just like I realized, like, hey, I can't just like flip a switch today and just like write a newsletter full time or whatever comes with that, or however that ends up, if it ends up you know, monetizing, right? But I can start writing it, and I can just commit to being like, the thing I always say is I commit to being consistent and I commit to being authentic. And as long as I'm doing those two things, I feel like I'm taking steps forward. And sometimes it doesn't feel like it's going forward, but then sometimes things happen where, you know, I realize like, oh, it has been taking steps forward, but it's just sort of like been a snowball, like accumulating over time. And so I really just try to think about it like, I'm doing what I can now to hopefully in 3 years, 5 years, whatever, then have the option to pivot into something that's, you know, like have the basically building the parachute, so I have the option to jump, to use your analogy.
Yeah, and as someone who did that with no specific intentions of quitting my job and doing it full time, there's so much power in the lack of pressure and the lack of necessity, and it keeps you clear in the mission of like, I'm creating something for myself. It's selfish in a selfless, it's not selfless, like doing something that eh, it's more of like I don't want to say it's like a pure way to do it, but it's kind of a pure way to do it, right? Like there's no bias. You're not being swayed because you need to make a decision one way or another. And ultimately, like for me, that's what enabled it to actually happen. Like I have this high trust audience that I've built because I've trained myself and those who listen to know that like for the first 4+ years of doing this, like I didn't need it, and I was doing it because I wanted it, and the extra dollars were nice, and it supported the travel and the fun stuff, but it wasn't how I put food on my table, and that that's an extreme privilege that then creates the opportunity of when it is how you do it, you're in a much more powerful position because you've built up that trust and you've built up that following, and people know you're in it for the right reasons, and then it's a bet from there, but it's a little bit of a safer bet.
Yeah, and I think there's also an aspect of it too where it's like there's no amount of like money or amount of like subscribers or any metric that I would ever hit. I mean, I'm already with what I've done in like 9+ months, it's already far exceeded what I thought it would ever do, much less like in some time horizon. And so there's no like number or whatever that's going to be like, oh, I'm happy now. It's like it is just about the journey. It's about the like every week writing an article, interacting with the community, going to races, like just being a part of the community. That's to me, that's what it's all about. It's really more just like how can I get to the point where down the line that's how I can spend more, like I can spend more of my time doing that versus, other stuff. It's really just like how do I spend my time is like sort of like the spectrum that I'm sort of inching on now.
Have you thought about how that transition occurs? Like what, as Aaron always says, like what would have to be true for that to be true?
Well, I mean, okay. Yeah, I think about it, but I think of it very like, okay, let's think of something that's like completely unrealistic. Like if somebody dropped $5 million on my head tomorrow, like boom, done, right? Clearly that's not realistic. But then it's like, okay, well, there probably is some balance between personal financial situation and then ability to earn a living doing something else that would then make that a reality. So, and then there's like a time horizon thing too, where it's like, if I need to bridge the gap between, let's say, where I'm at now and whenever I quote unquote retire, that's like an X number of years time, like you do the math, right? So I think part of it is just like finding ways to, I don't even like using the word monetize, but like finding ways to monetize, right? Like find a way to like like shift the amount of the compensation I earn in a given year from like my W-2 job to something else. And I think the more I can shift that, then that becomes more, more realistic. But it doesn't feel like there's like I do A then B then C, right? It feels I feel very much in that middle phase of like I'm just being consistent and I'm just trying to do the things that I want to do and sort of like prove like kind of what you were saying, like prove almost like prove your value to the people that follow you first because I'm not doing it right. Like I'm not like trying to monetize or trying to like charge people money or anything like that.
Yeah, and as a numbers guy, how do you think about how the numbers break down? Do you think about it as like some percentage of subscribers are paid subscribers and it's like a tip jar? Are you thinking at some point you'll do like a more content for a paid tier, or is it brand partnerships? Is it consulting?
Yeah. Well, so it's interesting because I didn't even realize like I know that like Substack allows you to offer like a paid like offer paid subscriptions, but I was I guess naively under the impression that it's like if I turn that on, that means like everyone either has to pay or they can't view it. But I recently learned that like you can just turn it on and people can just pay you if they want. So I guess that's sort of like the tip jar thing you're talking about, where like, I guess if positioned the right way, there's kind of no downside because if people really want to help you out, like, hey, that's great. But I'm not actually asking anybody to do anything, in exchange for anything. The paid tier one is interesting because it's something that I would be open to. However, I feel like I would need to be adding something additional of value in order to like make that ask. Like if I was going to say like, hey, everyone, I'm going to turn on paid subscriptions. I want to be able to, and let's say it's like $5 a month or whatever. I want to be able to say, and here's what you're going to get for it. And I want it to be abundantly clear that that thing or that collection of things is worth way more than $5 a month, right? It almost becomes like a no-brainer.
Yeah, I've had some hesitation with this as well. I have like 3 paid subscribers on my Beehive blog, and that's the for the long run side of things. Or I think it's actually 5 at this point. And then I have 5 paid subscribers on Substack. One is Alex from Eternal. One is another partner of the podcast network, the media buyer at Good Ranchers, and then 3 are people who read it. And a couple of those came, or 2 of those came from the recent three-part series I did on AI. And in that, I wrote something to the effect of like, a paid membership is the gentleman's agreement, where if you got value from this, I guarantee you're getting more than $80 of value in the first read of it if you do anything with this information. And so somebody sent me an email and he was like, hey man, that was like wildly useful. I really appreciate your work. And we went back and forth via email. And at the end of the conversation, I was like, the best way to say thanks, besides saying thanks, is like this tip jar, $80 a year subscription. He's like, absolute no brainer. Like, this unlocked so much for me. So some of it is like, how do you provide enough value that it becomes a no-brainer? But even still, just like putting it out there esoterically, people aren't responding to that. But every time I've asked someone who said that they're getting tons of value, they subscribe 100% of the time. So it's like naive to think that you can be like, oh yeah, 2% of my audience will become a paying subscriber, and that'll give me $5,000 a year, kind of a thing. It's something that I've struggled with, but like I do a lot of ads on my podcast, and I'd rather do less ads and have, different revenue streams.
Yeah, I guess I look at it through the lens of my general, like what I'm trying to do generally is like, again, just offer my like authentic point of view, but like I really do want it to be like a value add. And that's like, that can be value add through like, man, I just wrote something that somebody got a lot of value from, right?
Right.
Then but I also want it to be like value add in the sense that like I don't want to be taking more from my audience than what they are getting from me. And so so like if you think about something like a partnership or like some sort of like affiliate type thing, it's like, hey, if there's a way for like my audience to like get value through like a discount from someone, and then that's what also earns me something, like that's compelling to me because it's like I'm not taking something that they're not getting, right? Like I'm only getting it if they're getting it, if that makes sense. Same with like brand partnerships. It's like it's interesting to me, but I also don't want to compromise like the authenticity piece. Like I don't want to be, Trailwaves sponsored by whatever brand. And then it's like, people are just going to be like, well, clearly you're going to only talk good things about that brand. Like even like our Solomon experience, like I struggled a little bit because I'm like, I don't want this to come off as like somebody paid me to do something, because that's not what happened. Right. It's like, this is just my experience that I want to share. So it is sort of I don't know. I think about it a lot. I think more about like, how can I, partner with brands to bring value to the community, or like how can I do something that's valuing the community or the readers, etc.
And at the same time, there are like tons of non-monetary ways to add value. Like I was at the Like the Wind US launch party last night in Boulder, and a bunch of people came up to me and they're like, "Hey man, love reading your stuff. It's like helped me think about how to do business differently." And that's awesome. Like it's really fun to hear that feedback. And some of my intention with the writing and even with this podcast, or more so with this podcast in particular, is to speak directly to the people that I want to work with. And so I can communicate how I think about business and marketing. And it's literally led to either consulting opportunities or brand partnership deals. I have a long expanding partnership with the network via Training Peaks that came about because one of the VPs over there listened to the first few episodes of this podcast last summer and was like, "Hey man, love the way you think. Like we should have a chat." And we got lunch and he's like, "We have to figure out a way to work together. Like this makes so much sense." And that's put thousands of dollars in my pocket. And that's like worth way more, and it's generated material impact for his business and several of the people on his team. And
Yeah.
that's worth way more than, the $80 a year, or even like the burning the social capital to ask for the
Yeah.
$80 a year.
I think it's like a time horizon thing. Like I think it's easy to be like, oh, I have this many subscribers. Let me just flip on paid subscriptions and some percentage of them will pay, right? But then it's like, I don't think that's the way to do it. I would be curious, like for you, like those, like the conversations that you just referenced or the examples you just referenced, is that something where it's like those came up naturally? Like where it's like, hey, you're just like making content, they're coming to you, you're having these conversations, and you sort of like through that, you find like, oh, there's a very clear, like kind of quid pro quo, like value exchange that would work, that would benefit both of us? Or is
Yeah,
that
totally.
something where it's like you get to a point where you're like, okay, now I'm targeting like different brands to try to like, almost like repeat the playbook. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it really is that structures. I'm looking for I finally found it. I'll mention it after I finish this statement. Yeah, it did come up organically. Like that conversation with Jeremy, for example, he reached out after listening to the show or commented on LinkedIn posts or something like that. And that's now come up a handful of times. And then the continued, like, the way that I talk about building the network and things like that, it hasn't led to a lot of inbound, but it's led to like really high quality inbound. And so I was talking with someone this morning about it, and it's basically like business development. Like it's a way to demonstrate a solution to something that when somebody's ready for it, they're already warmed up and they already know. Like the people who are listening to this who work at a brand, and either like the way that we've talked about affiliate marketing on Second Nature or creator partnerships or things like that, like it's informing how they do business. And if there's a way to play in that strategy, then they'll pick me to do it, which is super fun. Going back to the subscription piece, a few weeks ago, I saw something on Threads that was the most unhinged thing about modern life is that we've normalized paying $200 a month for the gym and $300 a month for wellness supplements. But if somebody charges $5 for a newsletter they wrote with their actual brain, people act like they've been mugged at knife point. And my friend Rachel Pajednik replied and said, as someone with a PhD who writes about going to the gym and taking supplements for $5 a month, I endorse this message. I saw that post and I subscribed to her Substack for $8 a month, $5 a month or whatever. And then I reposted it and two people subscribed to mine also. But it's freemium nature is fascinating, and truly like what we're expected to what we're expecting to get for free versus the work that goes into producing the thing. But on the flip side, like from where I sit, like I'm doing brand partnerships, and that's creating monetization, at least on the for the long run side. And this show is monetized as well. We have Popfly as a sponsor who basically creates the best creator infrastructure to enable um, partnerships to be successful. And so I want them to be successful because it, anytime I work with a brand that's using that framework or thinks in a way that would put them in a place where they'd be a customer of a brand like Popfly, like I'm going to have a better relationship with them because of the fact that they're thinking in this way that's not coupon code conversion is the only way to measure success. It's like, no, let's measure top of funnel, let's measure the middle of the funnel, and we also have a way to evaluate, the actual conversion. And so some of it is like the bias of, well, I want other companies to use the tools that will demonstrate success. And then on the for the long run side, like my filter is, would I recommend this anyways? And if the answer is yes, then we can do the thing.
Yeah, I think it's a delicate. Well, it's a delicate balance, but I also feel like I'm still just focused on like the content side too. I'm doing it consistently. I don't want to like stop and like worry about this other thing. And
Right.
I have had conversation with people, or like people have reached out, and like I'm not saying that it's like, oh, there's like all this stuff like cooking. It's more just like I can kind of see based on like conversations I've had, I can kind of see the vision for like how it does play out, or like
Yeah.
how something could materialize, or stuff like that. And so I think it's more just like taking the step, saying yes to people reaching out, wanting to connect, reaching out to other people when I feel inspired and try to connect, and then just continuing to like have those conversations.
The other piece that's a less tangible upside or benefit is it's much easier to connect with people when there's a piece of content being created, or you have a podcast or a newsletter and you want to feature them in it. And so it expands and extends your ability to reach kind of like whoever you want and speak to those people, which again is an intangible benefit, but just
Yeah.
helps.
Yeah, I've started having conversations with like people or like brands or whatever, where it's like, hey, here's a brand that I saw somehow or learned about, that it's like what they're doing is either like interesting in some way, different than like their contemporaries. And like instead of me, like maybe like 5, 6 months ago, I would have just like wrote an article and then like, here's my take, here's what they're doing, right? Now it's like, hey, can I reach out to someone and actually like talk to them and actually like have a conversation like this, where I can then pull what we talk about into an article that's much more, I think, well, more accurate, or like just does justice to like what it is that they're actually trying to do. But I think also just like pulls in like that human aspect of, here's like their story, right? Like I
Right.
mean, it's similar to like a lot of the stuff that like, a lot of the conversations you have, where it's like, here's like what you're doing at like the business level, but it's also like, here's kind of
Always the
the
human.
journey that like informed that.
Yeah. So to that point, what was your intention with Big Alta?
So my intention with Big Alta was literally just to like go there, experience it, and then just be like an observer, and sort of just like try to see, like kind of try to see it through. Like luckily, I think I had the privilege of, I had already signed up to volunteer for the 100K like several months ago. And so as I was going into it, I was like, okay, I'm going to go to this race and I'm going to be like a spectator. I'm going to be like a fan, like just a fan of the sport. I'm going to be there like with a brand, like seeing kind of like how they're activating the weekend. I'm going to be there as a volunteer. So I'm going to be like literally inside this like, first inaugural 100K. And then, and see sort of like part of like the race directing side. And then I'm also going to be running it, like we ran the 28K. And so I think just trying to like take in my experience from those different vantage points and then try to piece it together in like a cohesive way, I thought could be, for me, very interesting and just sort of like compelling, as like from like a reader standpoint. But that's kind of how I was thinking about it. Like I didn't want to try to like attach myself to a specific angle that I then had to like fill in and write about. I wanted it to really be like, what about that weekend like really stood out to me? And then like how did that play into like the overall sort of story? So I mean, that's where we had like that shakeout run at Stinson Beach, where it was like
I got swim.
yeah, shakeout. So yeah, some of us were swimming. But that's where it was like, that wasn't like a planned, I mean, there was like shakeout run planned, but there wasn't like, that was like a very like ad hoc, sort of authentic like thing that just happened. And it's probably something I'll remember for the rest of my life. But that also played into just like the overall, like the broader themes of the weekend. And so I think just being able to pull those different things together, I think was cool for me.
Yeah, they put together a really interesting group of media people, and nobody really stepped on each other's toes in terms of like the focus. And everybody's, so Dan Green and Grayson Murphy were there as Solomon athletes, and Aaron and Brandon and Drew and others were there on behalf of the brand. And then Outside PR hosted the whole thing with Zach and Nikki, and we saw Gordon there briefly, and it was like a really thoughtful execution that there was so much intention around it that it created the serendipity of
Mhm.
what
Yeah.
happened. So like I spoke with Grayson and Aaron about signing Grayson at 7.5 months pregnant and the role of women and moms in sports marketing. And then the UCAN Emma Bates thing happened the next week. And here I am with two, loaded conversations in my pocket that are ready to be released in a super timely manner where we had no idea that those conversations would be supremely relevant in the moment. And it was just like that intentional serendipity that they were able to create, which is pretty wild. I can't remember my point with telling that story, but
No, I mean, I as somebody like, again, like I struggle to consider myself part of the media. Like it's my imposter syndrome. Like I struggle to feel like I belong in those places, right? And so it was my first sort of foray into that world, and I especially appreciated just how like chill and like casual and natural it felt. It was just like, hey, here, come hang out at this house, and yeah, we have these things on the docket, but like there was no like you have to be here and do this, you have to write about this, you have to do a podcast about this. It's just like, yeah, come on and check it out. And there's no like, okay, so you're gonna write about something, right? There's none of that. It was just like, here, come and check out what we're doing, experience it firsthand, and we hope you have a great weekend. And I think, yeah, to your point, it sort of lends itself to that more natural serendipity and just, I guess just natural like camaraderie.
totally. Seth, was there anything else you wanted to chat through today?
Oh man, probably tons of stuff, but I don't know. I might have to schedule around two at some point. Um, but yeah, no, I mean, I think it's just good to chat about like, I think for me especially, it's good to kind of check in like 9 months into doing this and kind of seeing like where I've come and then like all the sort of things that are swirling around in my head that obviously I get value from listening to your pods like talk about with different people. So I think it'll be interesting to kind of see like how that evolves over the next years, months, years. So
You'll have to listen to this episode again in 5 years and see how you're doing. See how it compared to where you thought you'd be.
oh man, yeah, that'll be a fun time capsule for sure.
So, Seth, appreciate the chat. Thanks for the newsletter. Where can we find you on your corner of the internet?
I mean, trailwaves.substack.com is a newsletter. Check it out. I'm on Instagram, Seth _LaReau, LinkedIn. It's where all the professionals hang out. Check me out on LinkedIn. Those are probably the three places for now. So yeah.
Awesome, Seth. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks. Appreciate it.